Hello, everybody, and welcome back into the Orbit Football Podcast. It is time. This is what we've been building up to all season long. National championship time. Chance to get a national championship for both of these teams for the first time, at least claim one since the 1990s. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong here, guys, but I believe for Washington it was either 1990 or 1991, and Michigan was 1998 was the last time that either of these teams have claimed a national championship. But there's been a lot that's happened. Obviously, both of these teams got the job done in the playoff semifinals. Michigan with the victory over Alabama in that one, a very gritty game, a game that was super mistake-filled where it seemed like both teams just kind of shot themselves in the foot, and somehow Michigan did it less and won. Actually, Michigan might have done it more and won, depending on how you think about that game. And then Washington and Texas was a Washington game where they almost pulled a Texas and let the game slip away late and go in the favor of Texas, but Washington holds on, Michigan holds on. The two undefeated teams in FBS football right now left on the table, left to battle it out. I'm excited for this one. I think it's going to be a very good national championship game. I'm joined by Blake and Tyler once again here on the Orbit Football Podcast, and I think this is a bit interesting because this isn't really any of these teams we didn't think were going to be in the national championship. I think I was the closest one by picking Michigan to win the Big Ten and Michigan to make the semifinal, but I didn't have Michigan in my national championship game. I will tell you that I did have them in my semifinal, but not in the national championship. So that's a bit interesting there. But neither of these teams we picked. Both of these teams we've picked against a handful of times. Both these teams they've been picked against a lot this year. Obviously, Michigan with their whole ordeal that they've been going on off the field. What's the future of the program going to be? Continuous questions around it. And, at one point in the season, I had said, it's national championship or bust for them this year. And they're at that doorstep. Are they going to bust or are they going to win the national championship? Well, for Washington, it's just been a year where they were the team that was going to be a Power 5 champion. We didn't even think they were going to be a Power 5 champion. And despite all odds, going on the road, going at home, playing on neutral sites, they win. They continue to win. Somehow they figure it out, and they've got to this point now. We're going to have to see how this is going to go, how this is going to play out. But I will ask you first, Blake, what are your thoughts on this national championship game?
I mean, this is about as exciting as it can get here. This is probably the most exciting national championship matchup we have had in a long time. I can't remember being this excited over one since, maybe the first bout of Bama Georgia in 2018, I guess that would have been. Bama Georgia Part 2 in 21 was a fun time, of course, as well. But, this one, you've got two teams, like you said, haven't played for a title, or haven't claimed a title, I should say, since the 90s. They've both been in the playoffs a handful of times, of course. Washington back in 16, Michigan the last 2 years. So we've seen these teams, kind of break around here, put their names in the list, but they never really felt like they were true contenders for the title. And like you said, last week we all picked against Michigan, and you of course picked Washington, Cade, but Tyler and I of course went with the Texas route, but they've been picked against all year. I don't think any of us truly thought, if you asked us halfway through the season, these two teams were going to be here at this point, that they were going to be the teams playing for a national title. So to have these two here, incredible. It's a great time. Everyone always talks about wanting the parity in college football, as they say. Well, we got it this year. We got it with the final rendition of the 4-team playoff. The top two teams in the country, number 1, 2 seeds, make their way to the national title game, and we get a matchup that I think everybody should be very excited for. We're going to get a first-time champion for this century. So really excited here. Leading off into it, though, on the matchup itself, I think there's going to be I think there's three really major aspects to this game here on what is going to come down and decide this thing at the end of the day. The first one, and I think what the most important thing is going to be here by far, is what does Michigan do with J.J. McCarthy? How do they utilize him in this game? Um, and of course, I guess you can mention Orgy a little bit. We talked a little bit. We were joking a little bit before this that we're going to see him appear in this game tonight for certain. Whether they should or not is up to interpretation. Of course, we're not there on the sideline calling it, but I don't know that he should trot out there at all. I think this should be a JJ only at the quarterback position game unless we're going out of Wildcat. So, but it's going to be about big time, or what most importantly here is going to be how do you utilize JJ this game if you're Michigan, because we've seen them for a lot of the year. Number one, they tend to run the football first and foremost. That's been the goal to the back half of the season. Once kind of the tackles started breaking down for Michigan, the offensive line in general started breaking down, especially with some injuries down the line. The tackles all year had some up and down struggles. But so for this back half of the season, they've really just tried to dominate the run game, just chip away slowly and surely on drives, burn the clock down a little bit, break off some runs when you can, and just wear down other teams up front. And it's worked for the most part. We saw it last week against Bama. It didn't work spectacularly, but they were able to get the job done when JJ, of course, led that big time drive there at the end. But it's possible that they can do that here, but it's not going to be the most important part because I think you've got to utilize JJ. The strength of this, I guess I should say the weakness, I mean, of this Washington team is that up front they're solid. They're not bad by any means. I mean, Braylon Trice, of course, we keep seeing come up huge down the stretch here. He's been a big game wrecker in every big performance that they've had. Um, so, took a massive leap in that Oregon game in the Pac-12 title last week against Texas as well. Had a couple of really big plays where he got himself into the backfield and just broke the entire play down. He can do that. He's a great player. Braylon Trice isn't a massive athlete though by any means. He's a big fella. You know, plays listed as an edge. Doesn't really play a pure edge role just because of that. That size and not great athleticism here. So they're going to be able, and the same goes across that entire Washington front. It's not like they're not Alabama. They don't have Dallas Turner and Chris Braswell coming off the edge. That's why I think we saw JJ, kind of stay in the pocket a decent amount. You didn't see him really going out and moving too much during that game. You saw it a couple of times, but not really to a great level, which is really JJ's best game, I think, is when you get him using those legs. He's not a big guy. He can get out and move, let the play extend and get the ball downfield, um, or at least past get it thrown past the line of the game. I think is often where he's, pretty solid. Um, you got to let him get out and make plays. And Alabama was able to stop that because of the pure athleticism they have on that defense. They didn't really send it at JJ too much, but they kept him. The threat of it's always there. Saw Dallas Turner dropping back into kind of a spy type role a lot of that game, even into some zones at times. They didn't really send him straight after JJ, but he was always there watching. So that really hampered their ability to let JJ get out of the pocket and to make plays with his legs and make plays downfield by extending the play with his legs. I don't. I mean, Washington can spy JJ for sure. That's always they're going to have to. I think more than likely to do to have success in this game. But even with a spy, it depends. I mean, they're going to have to crash down. They're going to give JJ time still. If he can just escape the pocket long enough to make something happen, get out, roll out wide, let his receivers find some space on this Washington secondary, which isn't exceptional by any means. They've got some solid pieces there. It's not an elite defensive back core though in any way, shape, or form. That's going to be Michigan's biggest weapon, and that's going to be the biggest threat they pose on offense in this game. I mean, like I was mentioning, the run game for Michigan, that's what they've had to lean on the back half of the season because they've played more athletic teams, played better edge rushers. Um, of course, not really I mean, they played better. They played some talent in the Big Ten title game there, but I don't think that game was really going to be one where they opened the playbook up and really tried to do too much. I think they were just going to wear that team down, from the start because they knew how heavy of an outmatch they had there. But you saw in the Ohio State game, there's edge rushing talent there. There's athleticism on the edge more than anything there. That was able to keep JJ not in the pocket the whole time, but it kept him there more or less. Of course, in the second half, they again moved to the heavy run game. Um, they don't extend the play with JJ when they don't have the athleticism advantage, which makes sense to what they kind of have to do there, or else you're just going to get them lit up for a good amount of a game, which is not what you want to do with a guy that's 6 foot tall, and I don't even know if he cracks 200 pounds. So they haven't done a lot down the stretch because of the athleticism they faced, but Washington doesn't have that, so they should be able to exploit that. And I think that has to be their number one kind of go to threat. I think you're going to see JJ McCarthy throw the ball 35 to 40 times this game. I think there's a really good chance that we see that. I don't think that they're going to go and try to run the football here first unless they get up big. I mean, that's the one caveat here is that if they get up big, obviously you move to the ground game, try and just wear down Washington, eat the clock up at that point. Even then, though, I think you're going to see J.J. McCarthy factor into the run game pretty heavily here as well. I think you should at least. He's got the ability to use his legs and get downfield with his legs. And extending the run game with your quarterback is going to be a potent thing to do against this Washington team. Again, the athleticism disadvantage, physicality is there. With the current state of the Michigan line, with how banged up they are, down their best piece, with some of their other top guys, banged up pretty good. They can probably match Michigan's, physicality there, but still, I would honestly give maybe a slight lean to Michigan in the department. And even if I don't, even if it does go to Washington, that's when you need to use your quarterback in the run game and make a two-pronged attack. So that's going to be where Michigan's offense lies, I think, is most heavily. It's around J.J. McCarthy. He's going to be the forefront piece of this game. If Michigan wants to win, he's going to have a massive day. I don't see any way around it unless we have some, collapse by Washington where they just turn the football over 5 or 6 times. That's, barring that collapse, this game's going to be on JJ for Michigan. He has to win this game for them. On the other side, though, with Washington, I mean, their offensive attack is great. It's been great all year. They meticulously picked apart Texas. Not really surprising to see that happen through the air, of course. Knowing what that team is, Texas struggling in the back end all year long. Washington with 3 NFL receivers outside and a quarterback who had an incredible season. So that wasn't shocking in any way, by any means. And I think they're going to have success through the air against Michigan, especially with that receiver core. Mikey Sainristil and Will Johnson. I mean, good corners outside. Certainly they are, but I mean, you're asking them to go up against that receiving unit, which is just it's going to be a bad matchup for anybody in college football. You've got one guy there in Rome Odunze who could have played in the NFL this year and probably been a 1,000-yard receiver for somebody. Polk and McMillan, not quite to that level just because of how incredible Rome Odunze is, but still, Polk and McMillan, incredible receivers. I mean, in their own right, very talented, and against the majority of defensive backs in college football, they're going to have the matchup advantage. And it's close in this game, depending on who they put on who. My first reason they might put Will Johnson on Rome Odunze. We'll see who they end up kind of putting on over there their number one spot. I'm sure they'll try and work in some different coverage schemes to just kind of mix it up and eliminate that matchup disadvantage. But we'll see how that goes. Ultimately, Minter's a good defensive coordinator, and I'm sure he'll have a good game plan for this. But still, they're going to be at a disadvantage regardless. So Washington should be able to throw the football to a decent level. The one big thing is that what's the Michigan pass rush going to do? We saw Texas pass rush not have a ton of success against Washington. The Texas pass rush is not built to be super great off the edge. It's not built. It comes up the inside. The Texas front's been great, especially in the run game. That was their number one thing, which they shut the run game down for Washington pretty much completely. It was 3 Michael Penix scrambles that really ran up the numbers there for them. Dillon Johnson, of course, playing hurt in that Texas game, really hurt. Sounds like he'll play tonight, but whether he's actually going to is going to be a question. Whether he is going to be worthwhile while he's on the field is another question with how banged up he clearly is. Texas shut the run game down there. Michigan's not built to do that like Texas can, obviously, because they're the best in the country at shutting down the run. But I think Michigan is not going to have much issue taking the run game down, quite frankly. It's just not what Washington's built to do, and especially with your number one running back. Probably being kind of just a decoy at best. I think I don't know that he's going to be trustable with the football tonight, just with the way he was moving late in that game and with him going down especially. I wouldn't even like I said, I wouldn't be shocked to have a Kendra Miller situation from last year where we hear 2 hours before the game happens that Dylan Johnson's not even going to play for Washington. So we'll wait and see on that, obviously. But it's not going to be about if Washington can run the football. It never was going to be. It's going to be about if they can throw the football and hold Michigan off the scoreboard to enough of an extent. Um, and in the Washington passing game, like I said, there's an advantage there certainly, but Michigan's defensive front and their pass rush kind of just ate Alabama alive, especially in the first half, and then when it matters, especially late in the second half there. Um, which putting that Alabama offensive line in a blender is not an impressive feat per se. They improved all year, like I had said, but their weaknesses really showed again last week, which surprised me because I didn't think they were going to have that speed off the edge to really take advantage of it. But that didn't matter. They walloped the Alabama line through and through. It didn't even matter what they were doing; they just kind of came free all night long there in the Rose Bowl. So, the Washington line's better for sure. It's not, that's not much to say. It's a solid line though. But I still think Michigan's going to have enough of success off the edge in this game to make Michael Penix uncomfortable. Texas didn't do it that much, but Texas edge rush isn't spectacular by any means. Michigan's isn't wonderful. It's not, the best or anything. It's not Alabama or Texas A&M's pass rush off the edge, you know, but it's still solid. Michigan's still got solid edge pieces. They can create pressure. They can disrupt the quarterback, um, and they're going to have to. They cannot let Michael Penix sit there in the pocket all night and just wait for somebody to come up because it's going to happen. It's going to happen, a lot if that's the case. So whether they're going to be able to, I think that's going to be kind of the second biggest question for Michigan. Um, and that's the second key is that you have to pressure Michael Penix. You have to do something there. You cannot just let him sit there. Under pressure is where he struggles the most. That's disproportionate. I think you look at him in a clean pocket, he's exceptional. He kind of starts to fall apart a little bit when you get pressure on him, and especially because he can't move out of the pocket really. The injuries over his career have really kind of stunted his ability to move and extend plays. We saw him do it a little bit against Texas, which is the first time we've seen him in a while do it. But I don't think that he's going to be doing that all too much against Michigan, frankly. And I think, to be honest, I think Michigan's going to have success up front here. I think they're going to create pressure, whether it comes from off the edge or whether it comes from inside. We'll see. Um, I think it probably will. They'll find a way to come off the edge with it, though. And with all that, I'm giving the matchup advantage or I'm giving the lean here to Michigan on the opposite side because I think it's going to work with JJ. I think they're going to find the pressure off the edge. So with all that, I know I've doubted Washington all year. Everybody kind of has, and they keep coming back. They keep biting us. Um, but I'm going to do it one last time. So maybe this is me congratulating Washington on a title by doubting them again. I don't know. But I'm going to do it one last time, and I'm going to take Michigan to win this game. I'm going to take Michigan to hoist the national title trophy. It's the all or nothing season. It's the do or die, the go big, go home with everything kind of on the horizon for that program. We'll see what comes of that. We'll see if Harbaugh's there next year. But I'm going to take this for Harbaugh. If it is his last game at Michigan to walk out with a national title win, I think it's going to be a great game. It's going to be a close game. I'm going to take Michigan to win it, though, by a score of 31-26.
So you're going with the close game, and now I'll turn it over to Tyler, who's going to give a little bit of his breakdown for this ball game as well.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. This game is really interesting. I think this game can really go either way. This game is who had Michigan Washington in the national title game, both undefeated teams at the end of the year. Not many people. I know none of us three did. We didn't really have Michigan winning the Big Ten, so interesting. But we're here, and this is going to be an intriguing matchup. I can see this game going a ton of different ways, but unfortunately, I just think this game is going to have a bit of a gap, just because of how different these two teams are. Michigan, we've seen them, attempt to drop back to pass twice in a game this year in one complete half, and we know Washington can just, they can just load up and throw deep as many times as they want, and most of the time it gets completed down the field. So, an interesting stat: Washington throws the ball downfield, airwise, better than anyone, and Michigan just does not let up deep plays. They haven't all year, and that's going to be one tipping point. I don't really think this is going to be, I think this game is going to just show kind of the difference in between, developing talent and actually just having raw talent, because both these teams not very talented when it comes to, recruiting rankings and metrics of, player acquisition, but these two teams have obviously developed some of the best rosters in college football right now. Washington, that offense is just unreal. Multiple NFL level players there. Michigan, in the trenches specifically, especially on offense, they've done a fantastic job, especially against Alabama. They changed up their line quite a bit, and they looked pretty good. I want to go back to the semifinal games. Washington and Texas. I think we kind of got what we expected. The biggest thing was Texas. Their past defensive metrics weren't great, but you can say maybe they were playing some softer competition. They were up for a majority of their games. Maybe some of that got added in with just kind of when they have not their first team out there, and they let up some big plays when they were already up. And Washington, we knew they passed the ball against everyone at a really good rate. So I think we got exactly what I had in mind. I thought Washington was going to be able to pass the ball 100%. Just thought Texas was going to be a little bit better, controlling the game, but they didn't. Washington came to play on both sides of the line of scrimmage, and they kind of dominated Texas on the line of scrimmage, which we haven't seen that much. Texas has been one of the best game-breaking teams, and they didn't really get home against Washington. And that's the thing about Michigan. I don't think they have the assets to really get to Washington like Texas does, but Michigan, I think, is definitely better schematically, and I do think their secondary is what also helps their front seven, because against Alabama, Michigan had their way, either schematically, blitzing linebackers, especially closing off the edges of Milroe's running lanes. They did a really good job with that. Michigan, Jesse Minter right there, probably had one of his best games as a defensive coordinator, especially in his biggest moment. I think they did really good. But another thing about this game, I think, we've seen Michigan win that Rose Bowl in a really good game. I don't think we got the best of either of Michigan or Alabama in that game, I should say. Just really sloppy. Michigan, horrible in the special teams game. They cannot do that in this game, or else they will lose. But once again, Michigan, they completely lost a side of the ball, one of the three sides of the ball, and they still won. I also think, kind of looking back on it, I think we kind of should have seen the Alabama regression coming. One of the hottest teams in the country, if not the hottest team, and they get a 3 to 4 week break. Obviously, I think they're going to cool down a little bit. I think that was kind of happening. I just didn't really see it at the time. Michigan still won the game. They did their job, and they'll obviously be in Houston on Monday night. So, interesting matchup here. I do think I'm an offensive-minded, football watcher myself, aspiring coach, very offensive-minded. And what I think is going to happen is Washington's going to be able to put, some points on the board. I think Michigan, they're going to come out. They're going to play zone like they've done all year. They don't play a soft zone, but, zone to zone. And I think Penix is, although I don't really like Penix as a pro prospect, I think they're Michigan. They'll show some things that they haven't, that Penix may not have seen, but I don't think it's going to be enough to where Penix is going to have 3 or 4 picks. I do think this Michigan secondary is very good, and I think it's probably the best secondary that Washington might have faced all year. But I just think Penix, I think he's going to find his receivers are still open. a little bit. And, as long as he's on point like he was in the Texas game, which I think the Texas game was probably his best game all year, just based off of timing and, an actual rhythm standpoint, they'll be fine in this game. But, I think Washington definitely is going to put up points on the board. The biggest question is, can Michigan run the ball? I think people are expecting an explosive run game from Michigan here. I think that, people are, they're basically banking Michigan in for at least 150 rushing yards. Definitely 100, which may be true. But this is going to be one of the worst pass defenses Michigan's faced all year. And whenever Michigan's faced bad, pass defenses, they've liked to pass the ball a lot. They passed the ball of the upper 30s against Purdue, which is probably one of the worst passing defense they've faced all year. I believe JJ had around 40 dropbacks in that game. I don't know exactly how many passes he completed or attempted, but I know he dropped back around 40 times in that game. So it'll be interesting to see what Michigan does. I think this game is just going to be. I just think this game is going to have a wide gap. I really don't know who's going to win. I'm going to go ahead and pick Washington just for the fact that I've doubted them all year, and I've been wrong on them. I picked them against Oregon, the first time. But to be honest, I only picked Washington because everyone had Oregon winning that game. Caden Blake, they had Oregon winning that game by, a decent amount. So I just picked Washington to be different, but I'm not doing that. I want to pick Washington just because I'm not going to be, if I'm going to be wrong on them, I want it to be because they lose. I've picked against them too many times. I'm going to go ahead and pick Washington to win this game. I don't think this one's going to be close either way. I think this is going to be a tipping point game. So give me Washington. I'm going to go 33 to 19. A weird score, but give me the Huskies in this one, and we should be in tune for a maybe not a competitive one, but definitely a fun game to start.
All right, thanks for that, Tyler. You're going to go opposite of Blake there. You're picking Washington, so I got to split the tie now. I've been torn on this game. And unlike both of you, I've had my Washington, I picked Washington. I had my doubt against Washington. I'm finally going to pick him, and I got it right in the Sugar Bowl. And when I sit there and I look at this game, it's a very, as Tyler said, Tyler thinks it's not going to be close. You, Blake, you think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be a close game regardless. I think it's going to be a close game throughout. I think that, I don't think that there's going to be really a tipping point, as Tyler said, where he kind of thinks that there's going to be, for one team or the other, kind of a landslide switch in the game. I don't see that happening. And you brought up a lot of great points when you broke down this game, Blake, is that, Michigan, funny enough, Michigan's front this year, it's not where it has been in the past, the past 2 years, and they've still been, one of the better fronts defensively. Now, Washington, this is more so the biggest shocking thing this year out of anything that's happened with either of these teams on the field, is that Washington has had a pretty respectable pass block offensively. There were a lot of questions about that offensive line going into this year. It was almost, fully new offensive line, and they've done very, very, very well. Obviously the run game hasn't been there, really wasn't there all year besides, really the 2 Oregon games, and that's where Dylan Johnson shined. Or those 2 Oregon games, and I think that they exploited an Oregon defense that didn't have as good of a run defense as people thought they had. Dylan Johnson to me has been the X factor this year for this Washington team, and you're basically losing your X factor tonight. I understand that, he's probably going to play in this game because it is the national championship game. You want to put everything out there, put everything on the line, but he's been dealing with that foot injury since the middle of the season. It's been a while that Johnson's been dealing with this injury, and he's been able to keep playing. He's been able to keep trudging, but I don't think it's going to make a difference because I think if you're Washington, you got to pass to win this game. Simple as that. Like you said, Michigan, one of the best zone defenses in the country. That's their scheme. Jesse Minter has been one of the best defensive coordinators in the country this year. I think that he's up there with the other two in the Big Ten East that were fantastic this year. With Knowles and with Diaz, there were some great defenses that came out of the Big Ten East this year, and Michigan is the one that's left standing. And obviously, like you said, they got to Alabama, but most of really what they did to Alabama was they sent 5, they sent 6, and it was just a good. Sometimes it was delay with one of the linebackers, sometimes it was Barrett. They worked it out very, very well throughout the game of what they needed to do, and it gave Alabama fits. Now, Washington's different from Alabama. Washington, honestly, when you look at an offensive mind, I like Washington's offensive mind over Tommy Rees. Give me that any day of the week. Give me Grubb, give me DeBoer over him. And this is where I kind of saw something leading up to this from a Michigan fan. And he had said, if we've been able to hold Marvin Harrison Jr. and Igbuka, and which I thought his name shouldn't have been on the list, but if we've been able to handle these Ohio State receivers like JSN, Olave, Wilson, these guys over the past 3 years, what's stopping us today? What's stopping us against Washington? And I think a big thing about this is, honestly, the scheming for Washington's better with their talent at receiver. I think it's just on par with, those Ohio State teams that Michigan's had to face. More specifically, I think this game kind of looks like a 2022 matchup for, that's kind of the Ohio State team, I guess you could compare Washington to, in a sense, is more so the 2022 version of Ohio State. And, if you go back and you think about that game, Ohio State should have been up pretty big in that game at halftime. They should have been up by at least 2 scores, and they weren't. And maybe that's a difference that Washington can do. Unlike Ryan Day, maybe Grubb and DeBoer have better scheming. I think that they do with the talent that they have overall at receiver. Like you said, you've got a guy who can go play in the NFL right now in Rome Odunze. Like, I'm going to say it right now, he's my wide receiver 2 in the draft. I'm going to say it because this dude he goes up and he gets everything. You can throw it to him, it doesn't matter. He's going to come down with the football. He's been one of the best wide receivers in the country. I personally think he's been my best. He's been my number 1 this year. I think he's been the best wide receiver in the country. I've loved watching this dude play. I loved watching him play last year. He just brings a lot of excitement to the game. I love this dude. I love Dylan Johnson too. And when I look at Michigan, they've also got some of the best, defensive back. They might have the best secondary in all of college football, period. You've got Will Johnson, who's, I believe, only a true sophomore on one side of the ball. And then you got Mike Sanderstill, who is a fantastic story on the opposite side of the ball. I mean, Sanderstill's been there for as a long time, like many of these other Michigan players have been there that have built, what is leading up to tonight, making a national championship game. And that's really been the core of Michigan this year, is that, like I said, it's their national championship or bust season. Because, even if things don't go bad, and even if you keep JJ, you keep Harbaugh, you're losing a lot of talent on this football team, man. You're losing your RBs 1 and 2. You're likely losing a tight end. You're losing you're probably your top 2 receivers. You're losing a lot of talent on this Michigan squad. And with the changes in college football, obviously anything can happen next year with a 12-team playoff as long as you sneak your way in, but it's going to be much more difficult for a team like this. And personally, I don't think Michigan's faced an offense that's even been in Washington's stratosphere this year. I don't. The only one that I think you could maybe say is Alabama, but even to that extent, Alabama was a boom or bust style of offense. We're going to get you on deep plays. Well, who has the best deep play defense in the country? Michigan. That's where Washington also is. They're like that. They are. Washington is a very boom style offense. They get those big plays. And it's more so of a, let's get let's get Odunze, let's get some of these guys out on an island and be able to beat it. They've been great against man coverage. It's going to be different against Michigan with the zone defense, but I'm interested to see here's how I think that Washington will beat this, and here's how I think, Kalen DeBoer's mind will work in this situation. You got to beat Michigan with short dink and dunk passes, because if they're going to try to sell out, if they're going to try to go with the similar scheming that they did against, Alabama or even Ohio State for that matter, they're going to bring blitzes. They're going to be delayed blitzes, but you also have the most talented receiving core in the country, or I will say one of the. But, how do you beat that? Little quick passes. Obviously you can't stare down your read, but just little short passes. And I think Washington has the talent to do it. I don't know if they're going to be able to, be game planning or that. I don't know what Michigan's defensive game plan is going to be. Minter could go with something totally different in this game, not bring pressure and just drop a ton. I mean, that's kind of what he did down the stretch of the Ohio State game, and it worked. Obviously, in the end, it worked. But it's an experience versus experience style football game in this game. You've got Penix, one of the most seasoned quarterbacks in all of college football, and then you've got Michigan's defense, one of the most seasoned defenses in college football. Like you said, it's a really, really, really fun matchup, Blake. And I think it's going to be a fun matchup. I think it's going to be close. I said that at the beginning. I think this game is going to be close. A lot of people are thinking that Michigan's gonna have to run the ball down the throats. They're gonna run the ball down the throats. They could, but I think they got to pass in this game. I do, and when I come down and I look at that, and I think that you're gonna have to put it on J.J. McCarthy's shoulders. I mean, yes, he's a mighty fine college quarterback. I'm not going to take that away from him after some of his performances this year, but I just feel like he's due for a mistake-filled game. I mean, his first pass against Alabama was that close to being an interception, and it was a terrible pass. It was a terrible play. One of the worst plays I've seen in a while from JJ, and I know he's got, it happens. I know it happens for JJ because I've seen it happen before. And I feel like he's kind of due. He's due for that game where he doesn't look like even against Alabama, he didn't look like he was great. He played fine. He had a couple mistakes, but he played fine. And against Ohio State, he played his best game in his career. There's got to be some give and take, and I think there might be a little bit of give tonight. I don't know. I just kind of got that feeling about him. I've been torn on this game. I've gone back and forth on this game. I've gone back and forth on this pick, because it's so hard with the two different styles of these teams to predict how this game is going to go. Because I could see Michigan just absolutely dominating time of possession and Washington not being able to do anything. I could see Washington scoring on big chunk plays and keeping the game close, and Michigan can't keep up offensively and makes a couple mistakes here or there. Or I see a game that grits it out to the end, and one team is hoisting the trophy and the other team isn't, and that's just because these are two very good football teams. And that's really what I come circling back to, is that I have a lean. Sometimes I don't have a lean. If I have I will say if I have a blowout lean, but the blowout lean is not going to be the team I'm going to pick. And the team I will pick is going to be Washington in this ball game. As soon as I figured out that it was the two teams, I had Michigan in my mind, and then the next day I woke up, thought about the game more, and it's been Washington really ever since then. I got a feeling about this team. I think that, like I said, they're a team it's the best offense that Michigan has faced all year. It's the best quarterback that Michigan has faced all year. Michigan has not faced a team like this year. They haven't. And I just feel like Washington's offensive ability, it's tale as old as time. What wins championships? Great offense, great defense. We're going to figure it out. We're going to figure it out tonight. And I'm going to roll with the offense. I think that Washington has enough weapons. I think that they've got the game plan. I think that they've got the team. They've got what they need. And what they need, all you got to do is just have enough. And I think that they're going to have enough to outlast Michigan in this ball game. I'm going to go with a pretty interesting score here. I'm going to go 33-31 Washington. They beat Michigan, win the national championship. I think this is going to be a fantastic game. Obviously, I broke the tie there, so Blake's the only one going Michigan, and Tyler has picked against them all year, finally picks with him. Blake, you stay picking against them and pick with Michigan. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. It should be a very interesting ball game. Hopefully we get a good one. We're hoping we get a good one. But yeah, that'll be all for the Orbit Football Podcast. For Tyler, for Blake, this is Cade. Make sure to follow us on all of our social media accounts, including our Instagram and Twitter. That's where we post the most. And you can watch and listen to the Orbit Football Podcast on our Spotify and our YouTube channel. But that'll be all for this episode. The next time you'll hear from us, we're going to give, obviously, a recap of the National Championship. We're going to do a recap of our season at some point. We're going to go through, obviously, everything that's happened. We're going to talk about the big transfer gets. We're going to talk about a lot of things, but there's still football, around the area, even after the National Championship game, but we're excited for this one tonight. So thank you all for listening to the Orbit Football Podcast.